Just bear with me 1 moment, Chair.
Okay, just started the streaming. So, right, welcome to the Planning Committee available for Glamorgan for Thursday, the 17th of October 2024 at 4 p.m. It's a hybrid meeting, so a number of people will be online. May I remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. If a participant wishes to speak, can they please raise their hand in person if they're sat in the chamber, or use the raise hand function. When invited to address by myself, please could all participants ensure that your microphone and camera is on to ensure you can both be seen and heard when actively participating. And please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via chat for the sake of the recording. So please could I welcome all committee and non-committee elected members, cabinet members, our officers, and also anyone watching via the live meeting broadcast and our registered speakers. On that, we have, I think, 4 registered speakers, well, 3 registered speakers on 4 items, but I think one of them is going to conflate the two if we do that. There were 4 matters arising that were notes sent out to you. One on Garwa Quarry, one in Ruthin Quarry, and a couple on the Smithies Avenue applications, which should have come out to you this morning. So, moving on with the agenda. First of all, apologies for absence, please.
Councillor Wendy Gilligan, Chair.
Thank you. Do we know of any other apologies for absence? Right.
There he is.
Minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of September 2024.
Happy to approve them.
Yep. Moved and seconded then. Received declarations of interest and the nature of such interests under the Council's Code of Conduct, including whipping. Councillor Wilson, Mark.
Yeah, I'd like to declare on application 2024/0329/FUL. I am an ex-employee of the college, but I'm really declaring on the fact that my wife is a member of the college CABC corporate board, and I do not have dispensation on that matter, and I will be removing myself from that item today.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any other declarations of interest? Councillor Buckley, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. On application 2024/00636, I've got a personal and prejudicial declaration. I know the applicant and the speaker, and I've been advised to declare the interest and remove myself from the meeting for that agenda item.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Any other declarations of interest? I see no hands. Moving on. Report to the Head of Sustainable Development, agenda item 4, building regs, applications and other building control matters determined by the Head of Sustainable Development under delegated powers.
Happy to move that.
Yeah. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Agenda item 5, planning applications determined by the Head of Sustainable Development under delegated powers. Sorry, I lost my mind. Move.
I'm happy to move that, Chair.
Thank you. I believe appeals is the next item. I believe, Liam. Oh, sorry, Councillor Marnie.
My apologies to interrupt the flow. It's just that I'm here not really to argue against or for development at the Smithies Avenue development. I was going to preface my opening statement that having grown up in Sully, I do know both the applicant and the objective, if you like, but not any best buddy scenario. And I'm not arguing for or against the development, but about the situation that's led up to that.
Yeah, you have the right to speak as
Thank you very much. I
member.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Right, back to agenda item 6, appeals. I believe, Liam, you're taking us through this.
Yes, Chair. We have some slides to share. I got a few slides just to show some of the appeal decisions that have come in
Liam, could you
recently.
turn your volume up a bit more, please? It is quite quiet. Yeah.
Bear with me 1 second. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Oh, that's a
better.
lot better. Thank you.
Yeah. It was just I put it down earlier because there was some feedback. So basically we've got the appeals report. There's a couple of new appeal decisions. Well, I say a couple. There's 5 appeal decisions to report. There's a couple of new appeals and an enforcement appeal on the initial page of the report. So what I'll do, I'll just go quickly through these. I won't spend too long on them, but just give a flavour of the decisions. In terms of performance, it's probably worth pointing out that since April, we've had 16 planning appeals and 14 of them were dismissed. So that's performance of around 88%. So that's really good. I'll go through some of these decisions. So we start with 7 Hickman Road in Penarth. This related to an application seeking permission to change from clay ridge hip tiles with the angled form. So if you look at the sort of images in the centre, that's what the existing roof was, and they were proposing then to go to the roll top lead Heil tiles on the side there, on the right hand side. The application was refused by effectively on concern from officers around the change this would have on the conservation area. So you can see from the bottom image sort of the general character of the property within the conservation area. Inspector agreed, noticed noticeably different shape, size and colour, and felt that they would be incoherent and unbalanced within the wider conservation area. So it would fail to preserve the character, which is a statutory test. So that application was dismissed. Next appeal, then, if you scroll down, was Tyler Gwynn, 35 Broadway in Llanblethian. This application concerned the conversion of a 3-bedroom bungalow into a 4-bedroom bungalow. So you can see from the drawing below and the image of the bungalow as exists that they were proposing to raise the height of the bungalow. So the eaves was coming up, and that really would have a marked impact on the street scene. I think the inspector talks about the proportions and the effective character, the original character would be unrecognisable in terms of the changes. The inspector described it as clumsy and incoherent in terms of the design, being disproportionate in the street scene. So that one was dismissed. If we move on to the next one, it was land adjacent to Littlemore Farm in Llys Werney. Proposal here for a new dwelling. So you can see on the image to the left-hand side, the red line sort of indicates the area, the position of the plot. And then the proposal then on the right-hand side of the screen, the central image then is the conservation area, sort of appraisal plan. So the key considerations from the inspector's point of view was the impact upon the conservation area, as well as impact upon trees. The inspector considered the building would appear taller than the collection of traditional farmstead buildings, provided its visual context, and large roof lights and other glazing would accentuate its presence as a modern dwelling. The inspector found that the significant mass of the built form and the modern features would be visible and would have a detrimental impact on the visual openness and rural character of the area. Alongside that, there was a number of trees on site, and the scheme would involve the removal of those trees. So the inspector pointed to chapter 6 of Planning Policy Wales, which talks about the protection of trees, hedgerows and groups of trees where they have ecological value and contribute to character of amenity, in particular in the locality. In terms of the loss of the trees, the inspector said PPW is clear in its requirements, and I do not consider the proposal would result in significant or clearly defined public benefits which would justify not complying with national policy. So although they were providing for replacement trees, they weren't really of the same form or sort of quality as the ones lost, and there was no real information about, because I think the applicant had mentioned about planting off-site. There was no real information there around that, so that one's dismissed. Next one then, scroll down, is field access to the west of the village farmhouse in Colwinston. This was a conservation area consent application related to a field access gate and works to a stone wall that previously been carried out and was subject of a listed building enforcement notice issued in June 2023. The main issue here was for the inspector to consider the impact of the works on the character and appearance of the Colwinston conservation area. So previously there was a stone wall with a stile just east of a narrow field gate. So if you look at the left image at the bottom there, that sort of points out to what was there before. The stone stile comprised part of the wall and it had inset stone steps. And the gated entrance to the field was also narrower than what has since been built on site. The bottom right image shows there. As the inspector noted, the gap between the village farmhouse and the ridgeway, and that was defined as a significant open space and a significant view in the conservation area appraisal management plan. In reporting this decision, the inspector, in dismissing the appeal, said, the appellant's heritage impact assessment downplays the significance of the stone stile, which was not replicated in the built design of the wall, notwithstanding the reasons for the stile being damaged and not replaced, where it is stated that the cost would be significant. I concur with Cadw and the council that the stone stile was a noticeable traditional feature of the conservation area, and the loss cannot be considered to preserve the appearance of the conservation area and its significance. The loss of this feature is a gradual erosion of the intrinsic quality of the conservation area, which is outlined in the matters of considerable importance in the management plan. So on that basis, the inspector found it conflicted with our development plan, the listed building and conservation area act, TAN 24, and our management plan, so dismissed that appeal. Then the final one then, if we scroll down, relates to a fence. So I know we've dealt with fences at committee before, retrospective ones. This was a new fence, as you can see in the image on the bottom right, that was erected at the frontage of the site to replace a previous hedgerow. Effectively, any, as you'll be aware, any sort of fence or enclosure where it adjoins a highway above a metre requires planning consent. So the inspector in this case identified that many of the frontages to Hazeldene Close were generally open and many had retained planting within their front gardens. They had spaciousness and sort of a degree of landscape character, and he felt that that was important to the character of the area. The new fence was, in contrast to this, forming a hard, prominent edge to the site immediately adjacent to the footpath, which dominated the entrance into Hazeldene Close and detracted from the wider open landscape quality. So the inspector gave regard to whether fences near the appeal site had similar impact on their surroundings, but didn't consider it desirable to replicate this impact further. So that's an important point there in terms of consideration of the application and appeal. Although the appellant was willing to accept a condition requiring the appeal fence to be stained or painted to improve its appearance, the inspector considered this would not alter the fundamental concerns relating to the height and close proximity adjacent to the footpath there, which so that wouldn't make it acceptable. So that's the appeal decisions there, all dismissed. So back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Liam. Councillor Cave, you've had your hand up for some time. Thank you for your patience. Can I ask what it's about?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I couldn't get onto the meeting until just a few moments ago. Well, when I put my hand up, actually. And obviously there's a couple of matters on the agenda this evening, which I just want to quickly say that I come tonight with an open mind, and I'll review these applications with fresh eyes. So are you happy to take that declaration now?
Yeah, yes, Councillor Cave. I was going to ask, I realised you were late on. I was going to ask if you had anything to say. So you're declaring on the two quarries? That's right. So 2019 01337 full and 01340 full as well. Yeah, I'm proposing to take those as one if committee's in agreement, unless anybody objects to that. I see no reason why not to. Councillor Williams, you have your hand up. I think you were late. To
Yeah,
this.
apologies, Chair. My reason for attending late is I was held up in a previous meeting. My apologies for that. So no technical issues. Yes, I've been on this committee for some time, and those quarries have been across it. So I will look at this applications afresh.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Moving on then. Agenda item 7 is trees.
I move that we note it.
Move through now, yeah. Thank you very much, and seconded. So we, oh, we should have moved, we noted the appeals, the appeals
I'm
report
happy
as well.
to move the appeals as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah,
Happy to move
seconded
the
as well.
appeals.
So we move on to agenda item 8. And as I said just now, I propose to take the 2 quarry ones, that's 2019-01-337 full and 2019-01-340 full, Gower Quarry and Ruthin Quarry in St Mary's Hill, Ruthin, Pencoed. We have a speaker on this, but I think, Ian, you're taking us through this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So just to cover at the start, the matters arising which have been circulated. Firstly, there was a plan that showed the transport route from the quarries, which actually, further to that and further to a discussion with the applicant, there is an additional condition which I would recommend, which isn't on the written notes, but I will cover verbally in a moment. The second matters arising note was from a local resident requesting deferral and raising concerns regarding some of the matters to do with conditions, in particular relating to permissible length of temporary operations and absence of a condition limiting daily volumes. A response to those is covered in the matters arising notes. I'll come back to that condition in a second when I get to the kind of highways and transport element of the report. So just to kind of touch upon what the chair's just referred to and what's included in the report in terms of how it's presented. So there are a number of interrelationships between the operations which made it make sense to kind of report the two together and discuss their operation together. Members will note that the conditions are very similar for both quarries, albeit in a few instances certain conditions only apply to one of the quarries. Right, in terms of the history, so these two quarries have consents over a long period of time. There's a relatively sort of long and complex planning history to them, dating back to 1947 for Ruthin and 1970 for Gower. These applications essentially proposed variations to those previous consents, principally to extend the previous end of working dates from 2022 and 2019 respectively, due to the periods of inactivity at the two quarries. They also give the opportunity to update the overall schedules of conditions so that they give comprehensive modern controls in respect of the range of material considerations. So the site is, AB, are you okay to share the first plan? Thanks. Lovely, thank you. So the site lies northeast of Fermgorch and Graig Penllyn and to the east of Ruthin, approximately 700 metres south of the M4. It's accessed off a lane to the east of Ruthin Road that currently sits between and separates Gower and Ruthin quarries and ultimately leads down to Pantyllwyth Farm. The site is adjoined by the Coed Brigham and Mynydd Ruthin sites of interest for nature conservation, and the Brigham Moor site of special scientific interest lies approximately 160 metres away to the south. So, could you pop to the next slide? Thank you. So the applications, as I mentioned, propose the resumption of the working of the two quarries to produce industrial limestone and construction aggregate. Previous applications have have included limits of 27 metres AOD, and these applications initially proposed the same. Subsequent to discussions with Natural Resources Wales through the course of the applications, who had some concerns about potential impact of dewatering on the Brigham Moor SSI. The proposals have been amended so that at Garwar now the bottom limit would be 35 metres AOD and it would be 39 metres AOD at Ruthin, which is a reduction from a reserve of just under 21 million tonnes down to just over 16 million tonnes. The application proposes average of 500,000 tonnes per year across both quarries combined, and as context that compares to 1.5 million tonnes of output, which was the limits on the previous consent. So just an indication of kind of how this compares to those previous consents had they been implemented within those previous lifetimes. So in terms of phases, the plan on the screen just shows the first phase of Garwar Quarry on the east, and the proposals involve phased work across from in an easterly direction. So if you could just pop to the next slide, that shows phase 3. So just kind of shows the full extent. And then on the next slide, you've got phase 1 of Ruthin. I appreciate these are at a very large scale, so they're kind of just indicative. And then if you could move to the next slide, that shows moving down to phase 3. And the next plan is a concept restoration plan, which kind of shows how the quarries would be landscaped once the operations had finished. I think probably the main thing to note from that, compared to the original proposal, is that it's largely a terrestrial landform now, as a consequence of the changes to the kind of the depths that the quarries we work to. Under the original proposals, there would have been much larger bodies of water in the restoration scheme. So, as I mentioned before, there are a number of kind of interrelationships and interdependencies between the two. For example, the use of soils and overburden stripped from Garwar Phase 1 would secure early restoration of the northeastern area of Ruthin. The establishment of a stocking area in the northern area of Ruthin would be used principally for Ruthin, but a limited amount from Garwar as well. Use of waste rock from Ruthin to assist in the restoration profiling in the northwestern area of Garwar. So they would be working together, but like I said, with interrelationships in terms of use and storage of material. Access, if we can pop to the next slide. Next one down, lovely. Thanks. So access would remain via the lane that splits between the two quarries that leads to Pantyslwyth Farm. This leads to and from the main distributor road, Ruthin Road, with a projected 80 loads leaving the site per day, so meaning 160 two-way movements. It's estimated that approximately 1/3 would travel in a southerly direction, and 2/3 would travel in a northerly direction. Those are kind of the movements shown on that plan I referred to earlier that was with the matters arising. Through the course of the application, there has been discussions between the applicant and the council's highways engineers relating to the means of access. Access to Garwar would remain via the existing point from the lane. A new access point is proposed to serve Ruthin Quarry, with the existing access point retained directly opposite the Garwar access point. Some upgrades and improvements to that lane are proposed as part of this application, including existing areas of carriageway that are covered in detritus and vegetation being cleared and resurfaced to maximise the existing available carriageway width. Areas of widening within the confines of the Highways Authority boundary to provide lay-bys and a carriageway width suitable for 2 HGVs to pass. Vegetation within the highway boundary to be cleared in defined locations to improve visibility displays. Traffic control signals to be put in place during working hours to assist movements, not just for the HGVs leaving and coming to the site, but also for anybody else using the lane, such as people at Pantyslwyth Farm at the bottom, and signage and signals at the along the lane and at the quarry entrance points. Those details are covered by one of the conditions. So just briefly touching on the main issues in the report, the principle is set out. These quarries are considered to be policy compliant, and they are specifically referenced in policy MG26 of the LDP, with the supporting text noting there are no significant environmental or amenity constraints to the continuation of working at Ruthin and Garwar quarries. The continued use of the site for mineral extraction would ensure the Vale meets the aims of the Regional Technical Statement, which stipulates the Vale's reserve requirements, and these sites are included in that calculated land bank for the Vale. There's a relatively kind of long dialogue with NRW, as I touched on earlier. Initially, they objected due to the potential impacts of dewatering. Subsequently, they now raise no objection, subject to a suite of conditions. More recently, the applicant has been in discussion with NRW relating to kind of the fine wording of some of those, and they have been amended in areas, and some have remained the same. The report goes into some detail about noise impacts. The SRS officer has been consulted and has requested a number of conditions relating to noise management plan, noise monitoring, noise measurements and limits at critical properties, temporary operations, blasting, etc. Just in terms of transport, as I mentioned earlier, there's been a dialogue with the Highways Authority through the course of the application, which has led to those changes and improvements to the kind of the scope of the lane. The Highways Authority initially raised some concerns about the transit route in a southerly direction, but further to kind of discussions with the applicant on that and alternatives, they're now satisfied that's an appropriate route. I mean, it should be noted that if all of the traffic were routed in a northerly direction, that would bring a significant, aggregate additional mileage to all of those vehicles, and that in itself, has a quite a significant kind of sustainability impact. And just finally, just noting that currently there's a public right-of-way that runs through the site, and some concerns have been raised by representatives about the kind of the existing and previous impacts on that. There's no objection from the rights-of-way officer. Routes would need to be diverted around the perimeter, but that's generally covered by separate legislation. So just coming on to the conditions, you'll note there's quite a few. There's 45 or 40 odd for each. They cover matters not limited to, but key ones: a new end date for working of 2057, operating hours, noise, blasting, highways matters such as securing those improvements to the access track, biodiversity, hydrology, landscaping, and restoration. I think I'll leave it there for now, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Ian. Can you spell out then the extra condition that you wanted to?
Of course I can. Sorry. So the extra condition I would propose is, prior to the recommencement of quarrying operations, further details of the permitted timings of HGVs exiting the site to travel in a southerly direction past Llangan Primary School shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the Minerals Planning Authority. The development shall thereafter be operated in accordance with the approved details. And just as context to that, the applicant has been in some discussion with the school through the course of the application, and my understanding is the applicant would be very happy to involve the school in discussions leading to kind of the writing and design of that, the details that are submitted to discharge that condition.
Thank you, Ian. If Councillor Champion and Councillor Cave could put your hands down at this point, because it's the Speaker's turn next. Thank you. As I said at the beginning, we do have a speaker on this, Mr. Loudon, who's speaking for the...
Sorry, Chair, it should be... They weren't committee members, they were committee members, but sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Loudon, your time will start when you start. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, members of the committee. Today's meeting is the culmination of a journey that started in 2019 when the applications were submitted. During this period, the applications have been subject to careful scrutiny by the Council's officers and consultees. This has resulted in amendments to the scheme to address consultee concerns and the provision of further information to the point that all technical concerns have been addressed and your officers are able to recommend that the applications be approved. Yet it's worth noting that the applications before you are not your run-of-the-mill applications for mineral development. The proposals before you do not seek to release new mineral reserves, either by extending laterally or vertically the quarry workings. In fact, they result in a reduction in the reserves. The applications have have reviewed holistically the way the quarries are to be developed and the conditions to which quarrying operations are regulated when operations resume. This ensures that the resumption of quarrying will be undertaken in accordance with modern practices and controls, providing suitable protection to local amenity and the environment at large. This provides a sustainable basis for quarrying at the two sites. The applications allow for the working of the mineral resource at both quarries as envisaged when the planning permissions were first granted. However, to do this, a longer period of time is required due to the period of inactivity. This will avoid the sterilisation of a valuable mineral resource and thus benefits both the current and future generations. National and local planning policy recognises the importance that minerals contribute to the economy. The importance of the reserves at Gara and Ruthin are recognised in the Vales Local Development Plan, endorsed by a planning inspector. Both quarries are instrumental in meeting the Vales' needs for minerals into the long term, replacing current operations as they become exhausted. The two quarries are therefore of strategic importance. The Local Development Plan indicates that there are no significant environmental or amenity constraints to the continued working, and this has been verified by the environmental studies that have been undertaken to support the applications. The proposals at both quarries, therefore, are in accordance with the development plan and are entitled to the presumption in favour of permission enshrined in law and policy. I would therefore close by commending the planning officer over the preparation of his detailed report, the conclusions of which we support and agree with. We would therefore respectfully ask members to support their officer and grant the permissions. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Loudon. Do we have any points of clarification for Mr. Loudon from members of the committee? I see no hands up. Thank you then, Mr. Loudon. Move now on to the general debate, and if members wish to comment on the application, please. Councillor Cave, your hand went up first this time.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yes, I do have a few concerns about these two applications, as you could understand. They, in the report, we can see that there are highways concerns from almost everybody that has made a representation about these applications. I note in particular that on page 76 of our report, the highways engineer, and this has been touched on by Ian Robinson, that the highways engineer initially cited concerns regarding the route along the A48, which we actually have now in our late reps. We have a type of map that shows us that route in more detail. It would be interesting to hear what those concerns from highways initially were. I hear from Ian Robinson, our officer, that those have now been allayed, those fears have been allayed because of wear and tear on the vehicles and emissions. Now, emissions outside the school and all along that route for residents, right the way through to the A48, which is a really rural road. Then up onto the A48, we are being told this traffic, which will be one very large vehicle every 15 minutes for the next 30 odd years, within the time constraints, which I believe are 10 in the morning till 5 in the evening. That's a considerable amount of traffic. That will then travel through Clare Garden Village bypass, and it will come along the Landswick Road, which again is a road where in places it's very difficult for two cars to pass, let alone two large vehicles, and these vehicles will be going backwards and forwards, all these movements every 15 minutes coming and going. So I am very concerned about the route that has been chosen. I would like to know a little bit more about how those fears that the highways engineer initially had, how they were allayed, because I still have those fears about that particular route. And as those two quarries are so near to a motorway, I cannot believe, I certainly haven't seen in the documentation any argument that suggests to me that they should use minor rural roads that taxpayers have to maintain in the Vale. And this, after all, is a commercial activity. If you think about it, Clare Garden Village is, that development of houses there is a commercial activity, and they had to contribute to the increase in the road traffic that would come about by people living there. This is a commercial activity of which we're told there will be no compensation for anyone living locally, not the school or not the residents or not anyone in terms of maintaining that highway over the life of the quarry, which may extend beyond 30 years or so, but certainly for the next 30 years. I note that the agent said he has been on a long journey that started in 2019 with these applications. Well, what he's proposing for people that live in the Vale, particularly around these two quarries, extending into Cowbridge, right along into the final destination of this quarry material, which is almost like halfway through the Vale itself. We are being told that that's acceptable, and that journey for us won't last for a few years. It will last for over 30 years. So I am very concerned, and I would like to know a little bit more about how the highways officer's initial or engineer's initial concerns were allayed.
Thank you, Councillor Kay. There was a lot in that, so I propose to ask Liam to respond, if he would now, and before I come on to the other people who've indicated they wish to speak.
No problem. Thanks, Chair. Just to clarify at the start, I wasn't highlighting wear and tear as a particularly fundamental concern for the planning authority. That might be more of a concern for the applicant. But the applicant's consultant, when this dialogue was occurring with the Highways Authority, qualified that rerouting, as might be suggested as an alternative, would result in approximately, just under 300,000 extra kilometres being driven by these HGVs per year, which is not insignificant. I think that was part and parcel of the reasoning why actually a third, it's not the dominant portion, but a third of the approximately of the vehicle movements in a southerly direction was most appropriate. This is providing a really important resource for something very important, which is the development industry, building homes, all these things rely on this kind of development, and providing a convenient route to the final location. Aberthorpe in particular is really important, and just to be sending large vehicles packed with these weights around much more elongated routes is not considered to be an appropriate way to do it. In terms of emissions have been modelled as part of the environmental statement. So emissions weren't modelled at every property along that route, but they were modelled at properties close to the quarry. So as noted in the report, particularly with reference to the school is further away than in the context of kind of the dust and emissions section and air quality. The school is further away from the quarry than some of the properties where those kind of emissions and where that dust monitoring did take place. So that's considered to be robust in respect of kind of additional receptors that are further along. In terms of increasing road traffic, I mean, yes, compared to the existing, but the submissions have demonstrated that the road is of a size and nature that it has a capacity much greater than the additional traffic that these developments would bring. And it may sound like a lot to have 80 going in one direction and then back on the same day, but in the context of the working day and in the context of existing traffic flows, it's a relatively small proportion, and it's not an increase in traffic compared to what's already been consented at these sites. I mean, actually, critically, it is actually a reduction in traffic compared to what's been previously consented at these sites. So there wasn't considered to be any reasonable justification for requiring, financial contributions or for requiring improvements to junctions or anything like that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Champion, your hand is up next.
Sorry, Chair. Could I just clarify something that our officer has just said there? Because obviously the Lantwick Road, where this traffic will be diverted from Cowbridge up the Lantwick Road to the Nash Junction, in places, as I pointed out, there is not room for 2 vehicles to pass. So if we're going to increase by a substantial amount, I hear what he says in terms of the overall usage of that road by smaller vehicles. These numbers don't seem substantial. But when you take into consideration that on this road, every time a large vehicle comes up or down that road, the traffic on the other side, because it's a very small road, has to stop and give way. So that flow of traffic every 15 minutes will be stopped. And the pinch point is around the public house there, and it's very, very tiny. And it comes for several hundred yards up that road. And that will be every 15 minutes. And I don't think that's inconsequential. And I don't think we've given enough consideration to that.
I believe that Ian, the officer, addressed that point in what he replied to you. And yes, he did say that he didn't believe it was inconsequential, but he did say that it was within the bounds of acceptability. Councillor Champion, it is your turn now.
Thank you very much. The reason I put my hand up so early is because Ian said in his first remarks that it'll be 1/3 coming south. It's actually 2/3. So it's 53 lorries a day going and 53 coming back. So that's 106 lorries, which works out at, I think, about 1 every 1.5 minutes, not 15 minutes. I was the person who was very concerned about the route, and that's why I requested for that map to be shown. I still haven't really had my concerns relayed, or I still have those concerns about the route. I am the ward member for Cowbridge, and so you can see that it's going to really impact on my ward to a great extent. And I don't think there's been really enough concern about this particular issue. Transport, very large lorries going past that school, and also then going on what is a small B road. And I've been talking to Highways and Ian about possible improvements to the area around the crossing, because that is really a pinch point. And I don't know whether the agent would consider some sort of improvements to that area.
Thank you for that, Councillor Champion. I think you need to check your maths again, though, because by my quick calculation, vehicle movement every 1.5 minutes would be 40 an hour. And we're talking, 80 a day one way and 80 a day the other way. So I suggest you may have miscalculated there. Ian, would you like to respond to any of that?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I was just looking to double check on the issue of 1/3 or 2/3. I'm just looking at that now. I mean, it's fair to say that whether it was 1/3 or 2/3, the capacity of the road is perfectly adequate to deal with it. But I'm happy just to clarify that in a moment, Chair.
In that case,
diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you. I'd like to just go back for a moment to the number of where things will be going, because on page 76, it seems to say in the first paragraph that 2/3 will go to the northwards towards Pencoed, and another 1/3 will go southwards towards the A48. And then it goes on to say 106 movements per day on Velindre Road southwards, and 54 going northwards. So I think that's where there's a little bit of confusion, because it seems as though one paragraph states that 2/3 will go northwards and another paragraph states that 2/3 of movements will go southwards. So if Ian could confirm this, that would be very much appreciated. Another question that I had was in relation to the time when the two quarries were in use. As it seems to say, sorry, I'm just scrolling up to find the specific time frame, but I'm sure that it says somewhere that it's up to 10 o'clock in the day for one quarry, possibly Garwa, and then 8 o'clock at night for Ruthin quarry. And I just wanted to confirm the impact of that timetable for any local residents, or essentially, is it the only thing which is concerning people is that the vehicle movement, obviously somewhere between one every 1.5 minutes and one every quarter hour. If we could just have an answer on the question in terms of how late they can be operational, and if there's any better understanding on the percentage going northwards and the percentage going southwards, because obviously a number of the questions that Councillor Cave referred to, and to some extent Councillor Champion, are different if we take into consideration that the vehicle would go two ways and not only one way. Because if we're talking about 1/3 going southwards, well, actually, that's different in terms of the impact on the road between Lantwit Major and Cowbridge, of course. And if we expect everything not to go through rural routes in order to reach Aberthaw, how exactly will we expect to get there? Would you expect everything to go to Curlois Cross and through Roos in order to get there? Because I'm not sure whether this would be particularly a good idea. If the transport specialists think that this is possible for them to get there in a more direct route. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Payne, you have your hand up next.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested in the air quality provisions. I think it's page 74 and 75. So it said that there will be an adverse effect initially, and I wanted to know, it says that everything in terms of air quality is acceptable, but I want to know what monitoring will take place, particularly it says at the beginning of the development. So I know there's a dust management plan, but I'm interested in the ongoing air quality. So will that ongoing air quality be monitored, please?
Thank you, Councillor Payne. I'll ask a couple more people to speak and then ask Ian to respond to each. So Councillor Stallard next.
Thank you. Yeah, my question or comment is related to what Councillor Payne said, actually. So it's to do with air quality, and I read in the report that the SRS officer responsible for air quality wanted receptors to be located outside the school, but that was overruled, and I understand that there were receptors closer to the quarry, so it was deemed unnecessary. But this isn't to do with dust now, this is to do with transport-derived emissions. So whatever happens today, you know, if the application is approved, I'd like to see transport-derived emissions monitored outside the school in Llangan, because I'm speaking as a councillor with lots of quarry traffic in their ward, and I know that historically in St Bride's Major there's been a lot of issues with HGVs going through the village, and it was deemed necessary to monitor emissions here. So I think it would be a good idea to do that in Llangan as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stallard. Councillor Buckley, you have your hand up now.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if I can offer a bit of clarification as I understand it on the traffic movements. The traffic going south, 18-ton lorries as opposed to 28-ton lorries, which were going north. So that might account for, although it's only a third of the material being moved, why there's more traffic movements. And regarding the working times on the quarries, they are reduced hours and they're set out on page 86.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Ian, would you like to respond to all those comments?
Yeah,
before we
thanks.
move on?
So yeah, Councillor Buckley is largely right, I believe. So apologies if I've misled committee there. So yeah, the different proportions relate to the different outputs from the quarry and the different vehicles. So the general aggregate. I'll just read the bit from the report. So the TA confirms that in terms of construction aggregate, it would be transported in 18-ton loads with 2/3 north and a third south, based on the predicted output of 300,000 tonnes of industrial limestone being transported in 28-ton loads. That would be where there's 160 two-way movements involving 2/3 of those south and a third in the northerly direction. But I guess the point I would like to emphasise is that the transport. So I said the sorry, bear with me a moment. So what I'll read from the environmental statement. My read of this is that it's 2/3 in a southerly direction and a third in a northerly direction. But like I said, I just want to emphasise that the transport work shows that in terms of all the loads in both northerly and southerly directions, there is comfortable capacity within the highway network for that.
Yeah,
and come back on the other points. So the dust monitoring condition the dust management plan condition does require monitoring outside the school. I mean, in terms of emissions, and there's not a condition currently recommended which requires monitoring of emissions outside the school. I mean, I personally think that's quite a sound rationale for that. Is that the modelling has been accepted by the SRS team in respect of how the emissions impacts were modelled, and given the nature and the location of the receptors where it was modelled, there's a sound basis for concluding that there wouldn't then be adverse impacts at the school. If members wanted to consider a condition of that kind, I would need to give some thought to that. I can't think off the top of my head of what a condition that sought to monitor those kinds of issues would look like, or what provisions that kind of condition would contain to deal with anything that was found to be outside of any limits that were monitored. I think that's the kind of purpose of the environmental statement, carrying out that sort of fairly comprehensive and robust modelling exercise on what the emissions would be. So I personally, I'm not minded that condition would be necessary. I think the work in the ES is comprehensive in that regard.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wilson, your hand up.
I mean, obviously, as you know, I'm also a cabinet member, and one of my responsibilities is roads, and obviously road movements do interest me. And nevertheless, I think maybe we can have that discussion at ENER Scrutiny Committee in terms of road movements anyway, and looking at the impact of HGV vehicles on the network. But I think Ian is right. In terms of the overall context of it, it's relatively slight. I know it's obviously a very quiet area and obviously will have an impact, but in terms of the overall picture, it's still fairly slight. But yes, I think there could be a discussion, and obviously I can discuss it with Councillor Sivignano, who's responsible for regulatory aspects in her portfolio in relation to pollution. And I'm quite happy to have that discussions with her, and maybe we can possibly bring a report to discuss it further too, and obviously I could discuss it with Councillor Lloyd Selby in her role as chair of the relevant scrutiny committee.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Ian?
Sorry, I just want to try and give extra clarity. So some members in the chamber maybe not completely clear on what I said earlier about the loads. What the report says is that 2/3 of the loads of the construction aggregate would go north, but that's just a proportion of the overall. So as an overall, 2/3 of the loads would be going south. The 2/3 that go north is 2/3 of the construction aggregate, because you've got industrial limestone and construction aggregate coming out, and different proportions go north and south. But I guess the key thing probably for members would be the overall percentage going south, and that's the approx 2/3, not the 1/3. So excuse my saying it was a third earlier.
Thank you. Councillor Cave, your hand is still up. Is that a legacy hand, or you've commented twice?
She's buffering.
You're muted as well. I can't hear you.
It's buffering, isn't she? Can't see it. We can't see it.
No, sorry, Councillor Cave, we can't hear or.
I'd like to move to.
Councillor Cave, we can't hear you. It's a. Maybe you need to go out and come back in.
I don't think she can hear us.
Right. Councillor Wilson.
I'd like to move officers' recommendations.
Thank you. Seconded. Thank you.
Councillor Cave to rejoin.
Yeah.
You want to wait
You
a
need to
minute?
wait for Councillor Cave to rejoin to give her the opportunity to comment or vote.
Let's give her a minute or so.
I don't know why she's buffering that bad. She doesn't know. She wants to turn her Teams off.
She's not withdrawn. I give her a quick call. Give Amy a
We've got to give her a minute. So.
Yeah, ask Amy to give her a quick call. She's doing that, she
Delay, I'm afraid, is because we're trying to contact Councillor Cave to see whether she can manage to get back in. I think she's turned off Teams. Here she's back.
She's back without screen. That's okay.
Councillor Cave, you're back with us, but you're still buffering a bit on the screen. Have you got Teams turned off?
I don't think she can hear us.
Oh, she's moving around. That's better. That appears better.
She's disconnected again, Chair.
Yeah, she
She's
has.
disconnected. We can't delay much longer.
Would you like me to call?
Yes, please.
She can always record her vote that way, can she? Yeah.
Hello, Councillor Cave. The chair has paused momentarily to see if you can come back. We could see that you disconnected and rejoined, but we didn't have any audio. Okay, so would you like to try to reconnect, or are you happy for me to inform the chair to continue? Okay. Yes, no problem. I'll just inform the chair. Okay, thank you, bye. She's going to try to reconnect one more time. She was saying her previous hand raise was just 2 seconds, what had been previously said. Okay. So she's going to try one more time, but if that doesn't work, then she's happy for you to continue, Chair.
Okay.
Just give Councillor Cave the opportunity one more time to join but she's satisfied that we can continue if that fails.
She's connected. Chair.
Yes, Councillor Cave. Yeah.
Councillor Cave, can you hear us and can we hear you? Christine, can you hear us?
Don't think she can. She's frozen.
Frozen again. No, she's gone again. Right, Councillor Payne, you have your hand up.
Councillor Cave is still on screen.
Yeah, Councillor Payne. She doesn't matter.
But she may.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Councillor Payne, you have your hand up now.
I do. I was waiting for Christine to get off screen first before I came on.
Don't worry.
Can I just say, Ian, did you just say then that there will be ongoing air quality monitoring, not just at the school, in the community? So will there be air monitors? That was kind of my point.
It's so the dust management plan condition requires, well, it includes that it should require monitoring. So the condition isn't explicit about where that monitoring would take place, but the detail, the dust management plan required by the condition would need to propose details of where and when. So when those details would be submitted, we would consult with regulatory services, and they would advise us on whether that's an adequate kind of scope and frequency of monitoring.
All right, thank you.
We're getting a tour of Councillor Cave's house now. Thank you, Councillor. Right, I'm assuming that
He wants to come back.
Oh, right, go on.
Sorry, just on the other point that Councillor Johnson raised about the hours, these are a more restrictive set of working hours than was previously been the case on previous consents.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. It's a matter then for the committee to decide whether we approve these. The officers' recommendations have been moved and seconded. Do we have any indication of opposition? Councillor Champion, you're voting against. I take it.
Let's go for the vote.
So we'll go to a vote. If you could set that up.
Are you taking each item individually?
No, two of them as we discussed them as collective, and there's no
Okay,
point.
I just need to edit the votes.
Yeah.
One moment.
Just give us a few moments while we set up the vote. We'll vote. I mean, we can do if it's quicker. We can do it the other way.
Plus 4.
We're voting on both applications as one.
Okay, Chair, start with the vote.
Right, the vote is starting, so you know the routine by now.
Plus 4.
Plus for officers' recommendations, minus for or red for against officers' recommendations. Right, all 15 votes are in. I see 10 for, 3 against and 2 abstentions. So that the officers' recommendations are carried. Thank you all. Moving on to agenda item, application rather, 2024-0329/4, land to the south of Blackton Lane and west of Port Road, Roos. Just give Councillor Wilson a chance to leave the room. Right. Rob Lancashire, you're taking us through this, please.
I am indeed.
Again,
Yeah.
We have a speaker on this after you finished.
Okie dokie. Could I have the slides up, please? Sorry. Okay, thanks very much. The proposal was a full planning application submitted by the Welsh Education Partnership, also known as WEPCO, and Cardiff and Vale College, seeking planning permission for a proposed development of a new education building focused on advanced technology within the Cardiff Airport and Gateway Development Enterprise Zone. It's understood the intention is for construction to begin at the site at the earliest possible convenience and to be operational by autumn 2027. The proposed building, along with the facility, recently granted planning permission at Barry Waterfront under application 2024/00306/FUL, would be intended to enhance their offer and replace Cardiff and Vale College's existing campus at Colcott Road. Submissions detail that the proposed facility would provide for circa 1,896 pupils, of which I believe 50% would be full-time, representing 3 days a week, and 215 staff with an equivalent full-time equivalent of 85 within a building of circa 13,000 square meters. It would be at the corner of Port Road and Tredogan Road, as shown on the plan before you. The site comprises of circa 3.7 hectares of land to the northeast of Cardiff Airport, as you can see on the plan before you on the right, highlighted, edged in red. Land uses surrounding the site include the airport, long stay car park to the south, an aircraft supply shop to the west, and agricultural land to the north, and on the opposite side of Port Road to the southeast. Next slide, please. The building would have a 3-storey atrium at its centre with 2 principal accesses from Port Road and from the car park within the site. The perspective view before you now shows a diagrammatic appearance of the building when viewed from the pedestrian entrance from Port Road. And the following slide, if we could move on one, please, shows the perspective view from the entrance from the car park to the rear. As can be seen, the proposed building would be finished in a mix of cladding materials and glazing with a contrasting finish from ground to first and second floors. Next slide, please. Principally, the building would provide advanced technical courses, including those related to the aerospace industry. 2 wings, which you can see on the right-hand side of that image before you, are proposed to the east, which are indicated as including motor and building services and construction courses. Parking would be provided to the northwest of the building, as you can see there, with SUDS features and 2 muggers, which you can see marked E towards the northern end of the site, which would provide recreational facilities for students. Adjacent to the principal access, vehicular access, which would be from the north of the site, opposite the existing buildings there. The proposals would include circa 290 car parking spaces with 10% electric charging, and 284 long stay cycle parking spaces are also proposed. Next slide, please. The site is outside of any settlement boundary defined by the local development plan, although falls within the St Athan Cardiff Enterprise Zone and within an identified strategic employment allocation known as land adjacent to Cardiff Airport and Port Road Roos, which is predominantly for B1, B2 and B8 uses. However, it is relevant that the site is identified within the LDP and the supporting SPG to provide education facilities, with the broad position of the site marked by the red star on the plan before you. To this end, it's considered that the site, suitability of the site for development in this form has already been considered and found sound in examination of the LDP and the subsequent SPG. The site is currently served by existing half-hourly bus services and a shuttle connection with Roos Station, with a range of active travel measures also proposed to assist with movements to and from the site. This includes the provision of travel passes and the provision of the Cardiff and Vale rider service that will connect with other sites. Can we have the next slide, please? Additional measures are also proposed on site, including improved footway cycleway measures and a bus stop, which is within the existing grass verge on Port Road. This bus stop would be available for CAVT riders and potentially for future commercial bus services that might serve the site. This would also include a toucan crossing, which control crossing, which you can see with the 2 red L's, which are kind of more slightly to the left of the picture there, which would provide linkage to the potential future active travel route, which is proposed and included within the LDP along the southern side. It is the southern side of Port Road. Other measures would include enhanced signage and a travel plan to facilitate a modal shift and better modal split of people occupying the site or moving to the site, sorry. Considered noting the strategic nature of the site, range of measures currently proposed and those available at the site already, and following extensive consultation with the Council's Highways Development Section and their appointed highways consultants, that the proposals are acceptable in highways terms and in terms of their location. So the next slide, please. So the submissions, including relevant survey work, detail that the site is of limited ecological sensitivity, albeit a range of precautionary and enhancement measures are proposed and would be secured through a revised landscape and ecology management plan, which is one of the conditions proposed. The proposals would require, however, some vegetation comprising predominantly of overgrown former field hedgerows, which are as hatched green on that plan before you, with a number of quite a large amount of bramble as well, another scrub, and also circa 30 individual trees are shown to be removed. Can I have the next slide, please? The proposals have, however, been supported by a robust landscaping strategy that indicate the provision of approximately 130 standard trees, 0.25 hectares of woodland fringe planting, and circa 700 square metres of hedgerow in lieu of the circa 400 metres that would need to be removed to facilitate the development of the site. It's considered that this, coupled with ecological enhancement measures, would provide suitable green infrastructure as part of the proposals and would comply with the stepwise approach as advocated by Planning Policy Wales. Just lastly, in terms of a technical matter, just worth noting that Cardiff Airport safeguarding have been consulted and haven't raised any objection with regard to the proposals. Just noting obviously the solar panels on the roof and consideration of glare and other factors. As with the site at Hood Road, reporting to the beginning of September committee, planning contributions have not been secured for the development with regard to public art, sustainable transport and the public open space. This is due to provision of public art strategy and a proposed condition seeking integration of public art within the development. The highways considerations noted previously, and the provision of public realm, open space and atrium areas within the building. As such, it is considered that the scheme has either demonstrated proposals to be acceptable in these regards or in-kind provision is provided on site. In summary, noting all of the above, it's considered that the proposals will represent high quality and suitably located form of development to assist in meeting the strategic aims of the council as detailed within the local development plan, and as such, officers recommend approval of planning permission. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. As I said earlier, we do have a registered speaker, Mr. Roberts, who I believe is joining us from remote location. Mr. Roberts, are you there?
I am indeed, Chair.
In that case, your time, you have 3 minutes. Your time will start from when you start speaking. And I'm echoing.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this campus is to support economic development, the achievement of Welsh Government and the Council's net zero carbon targets, and the creation of high skills, high value jobs. As you will have seen from the Planning Officer's report, the campus is located in Cardiff Airport Enterprise Zone and close to both Brotatham Business Park and the planned Aberporth Green Energy Park. Because of the location and the advanced technology nature of the curriculum, the campus development is supported by Welsh Government, Cardiff Airport, Cardiff Capital Region and the Vale Council, as they believe it will support economic development and employers and inward investors to develop and upskill their workforces. In particular, the higher level skills and green skills that will be delivered at the campus will support both the new technology for renewable industries and also the necessary skills for the substantial amount of retrofit that will be required to meet the Welsh Government and Vale Glamorgan's net zero carbon targets. Councillors will be aware of the Vale's local area energy plan and that this identifies as a key enabling action the development of education skills programmes to meet the needs of employers. Based on our work with Cardiff Capital Region to identify those employer skill shortages, this campus will deliver those education programmes. As for the courses that will be offered, Advanced technology means that the engineering workshops will not look like those that I did O-level metalwork in during last century, with rows of lathes, drilling and milling machines. But instead they'll look more like a university research lab or a high-tech industrial site. For instance, there'll be an advanced composites manufacturing facility with clean room environment. Students will use virtual and augmented reality and AI to develop their skills and ideas. Rather than lathes, they'll use rapid prototyping, 3D metal printers and autonomous drones. Campus will have state-of-the-art robotics and mechatronics labs. Automotive students will be learning on electric and hydrogen vehicles, and there will be a green skills house for students to gain real experience of how to retrofit air pumps, solar panels and other renewable technologies. In addition to full-time courses and apprenticeships, we'll offer part-time courses for both employees and employers to enable them to upskill their workforces. We'll also offer higher education courses, either delivered by ourselves or in partnership with local universities. We believe that the quality and high-tech nature of these facilities will help us not just provide new skills for the current workforce, but encourage young people to aspire to a career in engineering. It is fun, it is exciting, and the
Mr.
jobs
Roberts,
are high skills
that's
and
your
high
3
value.
minutes.
And I hope you're able to support this application.
Thank you. If you stay on though, in case any members of the committee have a point of clarification for you. Anyone? No. I see no hands. I see no indication. Oh, Councillor Payne, you have your hand. Oh, Councillor Payne, you have your hand.
Thank you. I did want to know, in terms of childcare facilities on site, this is one of the questions I asked about the other Cardiff Vale College site, and I'm going to ask it again. Will there be childcare provision on site, particularly with women returning to learning and getting into STEM, things like that? Will that be supported?
Mr. Roberts, could you respond?
There is no provision for a Cressall nursery on this campus.
Okay, that's a little bit disappointing.
Councillor, it's not the time for comment. It's not the time for comment, Councillor Payne. That's for the debate. This is the time for points of clarification from the agent. Councillor Stallard, you have a point of clarification?
I'm not sure if it's a point of clarification or not, to be honest, but basically I just think that the location is a good one. And
Councillor Stallard, actually, no, that isn't a point of clarification. To be clear,
I'm getting there.
Is to ask the speaker to clarify something that he's already said.
Okay, I'll leave it till later then.
Thank you. There being no other points of clarification that I'm aware of, then Mr. Roberts, you can relax. I will now ask Rob whether he's got any comment to make.
I haven't got any at this point. Thank you, Neil. Thanks.
Andrew, you're indicating you'd like to speak. You're entitled to as a member.
Just like clarification from the planning officer, if possible, you mentioned that there was a bus every half hour. Unless that's changed since I actually caught one earlier, the bus is every hour. Can you clarify, please?
My understanding is there's a bus flag which is opposite the site, which provides an hourly service. There's also one by the Holiday Inn, which provides a separate service. That's my understanding. I haven't got the numbers in front of me. I'll just find them for you now. It's the 304 and the 905 bus services, which provide connection twice hourly buses to the site with Major Barry Roos Railway Station and Cardiff, utilising the 304 and 905 bus services.
Okay.
Thank you, Rob. Right, moving on to the debate on this. Members of the committee, I invite you to put your hands up if you want to contribute. Councillor Payne, yours is first. Helen?
Maybe legacy hand, Chair.
Oh, is it a legacy hand? In that case, Councillor Ernest, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, well, Councillor Andrew, a couple of minutes ago, actually has raised the very point that I was going to raise. That is the lack of transport to this particular site, and indeed to the airport itself. It's been a complaint for many years that the airport and indeed the approach roads to the airport are very poorly served by public transport. And we hear that as many as 1,800 students and I think it was several hundred members of staff will need to get to the proposed college at one time or another. We also see that the college operates a rider bus that operates between the campuses. Now, with respect, I don't think that any bus service operating between sites in Cardiff, campuses in Cardiff, and the college itself are going to be very much use in terms of getting students, well-meaning students to the new college. And I'm extremely disappointed, Chairman, that this application makes no provision for additional services for the large number of young people, I'll call them young people, who are going to be attending the college on a daily basis. I see that there is a crossing across the main road, which we all know is a very, very busy road, very congested. It has a lot of heavy goods vehicles, as well as many, private cars and so on using the road. And I would have thought, Chairman, and I'm fully in favour of the college, let me make that point absolutely clear, but I would have thought that we would be asking that improved transport services be provided to the college so that we do not have lots of young people standing around on busy roads trying to cross in between cars to get to the college. And I would have thought, Chairman, that it's endemic on the college to provide transport services, maybe from points of interest, maybe central Cardiff, not the college, central Cardiff, Barry, and so on, so that the students can get there. The other option of going to the railway station, Councillor Andrew already referred to this, I think. There's a train hourly, I believe it is, to Roos Station, and students would need to jump on and off to that train. I know the Vale of Glamorgan line is not well served and needs additional transport. So, Chairman, in a nutshell, I'm in favour of the application, but I think there should be some additional conditioning put in that adequate transport to and from the college be provided by the college management. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ernest. I'll ask the officer to respond to that. Oh, after Councillor Stellard has a hand up, I'd like to see if, or is that still a legacy hand, Caris?
No, it's not a legacy hand. It's a point I was going to make earlier, but it's better now anyway. So yes, I mean, like Councillor Ernest, I'm always in favour of more public transport, but I do think this location is reasonably well served, especially when you consider that it's on the national cycle route. Route 88 goes straight past the front of the site. So I was surprised that that wasn't mentioned in the report. So I think it would be good to make more of that, and it would be wonderful if some sort of signage could be put up, because Sustrans is a charity and they're trying to develop the National Cycle Network, and this seems like it would be mutually beneficial to encourage more students and people working at the college to cycle there, especially since the route is there already. It's just one of those routes that's a developing route, so it's not particularly well advertised. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stallard. Councillor Johnson, your hand is up next.
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to add 2 points in response to the comments we've already heard. One is, of course, 304 and the 90, the 2 buses do go to the site. One goes as far as Llandud Major to Cardiff through the airport on the way. The 905, of course, connects to Roos train station and then goes on to St Athan as well. Truth is, if the college wants this site to be successful, they need to make sure that people can get to it. My hope is that it doesn't end up being a site which is over-reliant on cars. The truth of the matter is, although I accept the point that this is an appropriate site for the type of work that the college seeks to undertake, of course, it's not a population centre. It's not a large urban site. As a committee, we've already heard for plans to build a site on Barry waterfront. So this is another one. So we need to face the fact that if we want to build on this site, people need to travel to it. And the fact that the college is committing to some sort of rider, whatever they call it, between the different sites that they operate in Cardiff and Vale of Glamorgan, of course, that would be the best way for students to reach the site, especially those who do not own a car. There are so many parking spots on the site. It's quite large, and therefore we're not avoiding the fact that people will get to the site via cars, but we do need to make sure that public transport, bus or train is effective. So that's really crucial. So just like some sort of response from Rob on how the travel plan will work. And a second point, just to respond to one of the earlier points in terms of facilities for creche or childcare and so forth. Of course, this site is being developed through an agreement, as we heard earlier, with Welsh Government, Vale Council and so forth. If this is not possible to provide services to ensure that it's a site which is usable for everybody, this is a failure of public agencies, which of course are funding this. So if people feel as though this is a weakness, we need to consider why we have arrived at a point where this is a weakness or a shortfall. Today, all we can do is accept or reject the plan that we have before us, but we do need to consider, or the college needs to consider those comments, that if they don't provide childcare provision to support people, perhaps they should come back with some sort of explanation and should consider how they will address this going forwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Perry, you have your hand up next.
Good afternoon. Yeah, so obviously the speaker didn't touch very much on planning, but other things. Just a quick note on the Route 88 of the National Cycleway Network. It does actually come through my ward, and I think not very many other members of this committee have cycled it. It's pretty unusable when it's wet. It's not particularly nice to drive in the car because the surface is so rough. So until you actually fix the route, we really shouldn't be encouraging people to use it, particularly up the very steep hill. So yeah, it's there. It ain't very good. We've gone through the age of the out of town shopping centre. Then we had the out of town entertainment centre. And now, despite the climate emergency, despite the Future Generations Act, we are now talking about the out-of-town education centres, car dependent, transport dependent. And I went to university at a campus that was brand new on the outskirts, and I looked at all the old buildings they were demolishing, all the environmental footprints demolishing, all the environmental footprints of the new buildings, and thought how wonderful it would have been to actually have your campus within the town as it had been, rather than these huge vanity projects on the outskirts. Something that I remember from my college days was the evening use of buildings, and we need to utilise our buildings. So yes, there are bus services during the day, and this comes up. Oh, I got here by bus today, but you're not going there in the evening, and we need to think about how people move after 6 p.m. And there are very, very few bus services in the whole of Wales after 6 p.m. Unlike London, which has got a far superior bus service to what we've got. So yeah, we are building in cars because we don't think beyond 6 p.m. and colleges tend to offer services, education after 6 p.m. Perhaps it's not the case in this building. Perhaps it shuts up at 5 o'clock. I don't think so. And really, you want to utilise your building all the time. So the best place for an education centre really is probably Colcott Road, next to the hospital, supporting the bus.
Councillor Perry, it's not the time now to be suggesting alternative locations. We're discussing this particular. We're discussing this application in this location.
I'm sorry, Chair, but I don't think you understand.
No, you're speaking over me now.
Spatial planning
you're speaking over me now. Please stop.
Well, can you?
Please stop.
Yeah, but I seem to get spoken over all the time.
Please stop.
So, as far as the airport goes,
Councillor Perry. Please stop for the moment while I'm speaking. You're being rude and discourteous.
Why do I think so?
You are moving away from this application into other realms of possibilities and fantasy. In fact, we are not talking. Councillor Perry, you're interrupting me again. Please don't. Please stop. Can you mute him? Thank you. Right, moving on. Councillor Ernest.
Chairman, I'll be very brief. I think in view of the concerns expressed by several members from all sides of the chamber, that this application could be deferred this evening for the college and officers to come back with answers to the questions that have been raised. I think we'd be wrong to let it go through this evening for the sake of 4 weeks or whatever it is till our next meeting. We don't often defer applications, but I think this is one good time, and I hear support from not only my side but the other sides of the chamber, and I would move that we defer the application for 4 weeks to allow the applicants to revert back to us with answers to the questions raised by members this evening. I so move.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ernest. I believe that the questions that have been raised mostly can be addressed by the officer, because a lot of the questions that are officer related related to the report. The only one that I think is different would be the question of the creche, which I think may be and childcare at the site, which I think can be raised in different ways. So but you have moved deferment. I don't know if there's a seconder.
Councillor Perry's indicating second, yeah.
Councillor Perry's got his hand up, but Councillor Perry has had his hand up constantly from the time you muted him. Councillor Perry, are you coming back? Quiet, and yeah. Will you be respectful? Because if not, I'll have you kicked out.
Officer, but you're shouting me down and suggest that I haven't been. I completely disagree.
You were speaking over me. That is disrespectful to the chair. Please don't do that. I asked you on a number of occasions and then had you muted because you wouldn't stop.
I
That
seem to
was
get muted
disrespectful.
rather a lot. But anyhow, I don't think so. I think my residents are being disrespectful. Please remember that elected members are representing communities and representing people with different views.
Councillor Perry, I'm aware of that, which is one of the reasons why I'm letting you back in. But the fact that you consistently move off-piste, off the subject of what we're talking about, is not helpful to either this committee or yourself.
I think I was talking about spatial planning and comparing two sites, the current site and a potential new site. I would like to second what Anthony Ernest said, because there are obviously concerns on the committee, and spatial planning, something I know a little bit about. You want to locate these wonderful projects, and I completely support education and investment in education, but it's critical that we put them in the right location. And I don't think all of us here are convinced at this moment that this is the right location. Thank you.
Councillor Hodges.
Thank you, Chairman. I really wasn't going to speak on this. I thought the principle of the new colleges within the Vale of Glamorgan was well established, and I thought that this had been thrashed out some years ago when the LDP was agreed. To try and now suggest a totally different venue site for a college, I think you need, as a councillor, to talk to the college people. This is their plan. This is what is in front of us. This is what we're going to vote on. I can't see a need to delay this vote. If a creche is needed, it may be that someone private will come forward to do that. I don't know. It would be nice to have it. However, I don't think it dams or stops the application that's in front of us. As for public transport, I suspect an increased amount of public transport will only come available once the college is built. It's not going to be provided now. I think if there is the business opportunity for Cardiff Bus or any of the smaller independent ones, if they want to tap into these increased numbers, I'm sure they will. But they're not going to do it before the college is even built. So I would resist a delay. I suggest that we go to the vote, although it's been moved and seconded. So I suggest we have the vote on deferment, hopefully get that out of the way and have a proper debate on this scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hodges. I'll call in Councillor Buckley quickly to speak, and then we will move to a vote on the deferment. And then, if anyone wants to continue discussion on the officer's recommendations, we can do that. Oh yeah, Councillor Buckley first. Then we'll ask Rob, the officer, to comment. So, Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. What I was going to say echoes Councillor Hodges, but also Councillor Ernest and one or two others have asked questions regarding public transport, and they haven't given the officers a chance to respond before they've jumped the gun and started the motion. I think we should listen to the answers regarding the public transport first.
I take your point, Councillor Buckley. Rob, Rob Lancashire, you're next. If you want to respond.
Okay, it's quite a lot of information or points to go through, so just bear with me 1 second. So just checking in terms of running time for the 304 and the 905. I've just looked on the internet now. They both run until half past 11 at night. In terms, and I believe they start in the early hours of the morning. So in terms of the actual times of the services, they should be suitable to provide a degree of that. I think just kind of echoing what Councillor Hodges mentioned in terms of the site is allocated for an employment use, and it's land adjacent to Cardiff Airport and Port Road. Roos is as part of the enterprise zone. Just quoting policy MG10 here. Site is not allocated to meet local market demand for general industrial or other uses, but rather to accommodate business and employment uses, catering specifically for the needs of the aerospace industry and high-tech manufacturing. There are plans to create an airport city taking the form of a business destination for local and international business, including quality office accommodation, specialist education, training facilities and leisure developments. So clearly this is set within the local development plan that's been adopted and gone through the examination procedure. So the sustainability and the suitability of a location has been considered at that point. In terms of so there's existing public transport provision. I would suggest that obviously this allocation of the site, until such time as there's a demand for services at the site, it's a bit little chicken and egg in terms of when additional public transport would come forward. Clearly there is demand. A private company or Cardiff Bus or First Bus or whoever it may be would seek to service the site, and obviously then it's also acknowledged that this is a largely publicly funded exercise, and the college actually have said in one of the submissions that they are liaising with Cardiff Bus with a view to increasing or with a view to kind of furnishing the site with sufficient services by the time it opens, as I mentioned, in 2020, with target in 2027. Notwithstanding that, then obviously the measures I mentioned before in terms of the bus passes, the subsidised transport proposals that they would be looking to provide, that includes a CABC rider service. The rider service, we did see quite a lot of clarification on this during the course of the application as to how it would service the different sites. It's not just linking the site to those in Cardiff, it would link it to the Colcott Road site as existing or the Hood Road site. So it would join existing services, including those within Barry, which in turn would connect to other public transport options that might be more suitable for certain students, or if they could walk to one of those sites, again, it would offer that. Undoubtedly, there's a car park providing for 290 cars. It's expected there would be a degree of car-driven transport to the site. However, this has been assessed by our highways officers and their the Point Highways consultant found to be sound. So that would be my point with regard to the kind of position of that. And in terms of obviously the thrust of the policy, it does look to co-locate this type of facility with the type of services and the type of employment uses that it would serve, and hence why it is proposed in this location. It's no accident that the aim is to create this kind of airport city relating to the aerospace industry rather than a general kind of industrial uses that wouldn't need to be there. So just in terms of some of the other points raised, I know, I think it was Councillor Ernest mentioned about concerns about students walking around the site, or concerns about being dropped off at the site, or kind of issues potentially about clashes with existing transport. The proposals do look to, and this is one of the conditions in terms of off-site works, would be to provide traffic regulation orders around the site, which would limit parking on the existing highway to stop kind of indiscriminate drop-offs and pickups on the public highway and create obstruction. It would also be proposed to, I think, reduce the speed limit to 30 miles an hour immediately adjacent to the vicinity of the site on Port Road, obviously to create a safer environment, including on the controlled crossing. So it's a controlled crossing, which would, in time link to that, but also provide a safer pedestrian environment in general terms. I'm trying to think. Councillor Stallard asked with regard to National Cycle Route 88. If you bear with me 1 second, I am going to try and share. I know this has gone horribly wrong before, so hopefully it doesn't kick me out of the. Is that sharing? Can you see a plan, or can you just see my face at the minute? I don't know what you can see.
We can see something says waiting for sharing source.
Okay, just bear with me then 1 moment. That one. Okay, sorry, it's just going a bit sluggishly on my side. Can you see that? Okay.
A map's just come up.
The maps should come up. Okay, so National Cycle Route 88 runs along this route here, along Porthkerry Road and up Tredogan Road there. The site itself is here. But notwithstanding that, I did speak with our highways colleagues earlier, and there is a condition on proposed which relates to additional signage to the site, and it's possible that that could be amended to include, or just amended to include, a requirement for signage to connect with the National Cycle Route, or it could that would be a consideration in any event as part of the consideration by officers when those details come in. So just to clarify, it doesn't run immediately adjacent to the site. There is a proposed active travel route along Port Road, and I believe there's a bus route that is proposed along here, but this is where National Cycle Route 88 runs relative to the site. So it is just the other side of a long stay car park on the opposite side of a road. But yes, it could be sorted within the application potentially. So, okay, I'm glad that worked and it didn't chuck me out like it did last time I tried to do that. Yeah, I believe that hopefully covered some of those points off, which might inform any prospective vote about deferral. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Rob. In that case, we'll move straight to the vote on deferral that's been moved by Councillor Ernest and seconded by Councillor Perry. Is that ready? Right, the vote has started. If you are voting for deferral, you vote plus. If you're voting against deferral, you vote minus or against, depending on who you are and where you are. 14 allowed to vote. We have 13 votes in and 1. Oh, that's probably Mark. Yes. Yeah. I think everyone who's eligible to vote has voted. Because Councillor Cave, is she back in? Or?
Councillor Cave is not.
Right, Councillor Cave isn't with us, so there's actually only 13 of us eligible to vote on this. All votes are in. 11 voted no.
Shouldn't you have a maximum of 50?
No.
So
Okay.
14 with Wilson.
14 with Wilson, 15 with Cave.
Gilligan.
She's not on. She's not here.
Yeah, so you're 17. Get minus 1. Gilligan. Cave.
Well, 15 before.
Cave's not on, no.
That's it.
Yeah,
We're right.
That's fine.
We are right. You're right. So that the motion for deferral is defeated. Councillor Hodges.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I move
Chairman, I was going to say thank you to committee for listening, but thank you.
Can I move officer's recommendation?
Thank you, Councillor Hodges. Councillor Williams, your hand is up.
Second.
Thank you for that. Councillor Johnson, you were seconding. Councillor Payne was obviously seconding. She put her hand up and put it down. I see no other hands. In which case, can we please move to the vote on this? All in favour? All in favour, vote yes. And those against, vote no. And abstentions, of course. Still one to vote. No, that's it. Yeah, there are 13 eligible to vote. This is as Councillor Cave and Councillor Wilson aren't present. So we have 11 voting in favour of the officer's recommendations, 1 against and 1 abstention. So that is clearly carried. Thank you very much for that. Right, moving on. Yeah. Well, moving on, we'll just give Councillor Wilson a moment to rejoin us. He's around somewhere, I hope. And we'll move on to item 2024-00636, Oblique Fall, 34 Smithies Avenue, Sully. We have a speaker on this. And as I said, and the local member has indicated he wants to speak on this as well. And we've had some late reps on it as well, Kevin, I think, this morning.
Chair, I'll step out now. Okay.
Oh yes. Thank you, Councillor Buckley. You declared an interest as well. Thank you very much. Right. I think Rob, you're presenting on this again.
I am indeed. Thank you very much. Okay. So before proceedings, noted that matters arising have been received and circulated to members. One of which was from the applicant and another from the occupiers of the neighbouring dwelling of 34A Smithies Avenue. Just with regard to those from the applicant, it's the matters arising note does detail the issues therein, highlighted some factual inaccuracies and what they considered to be omissions from the committee report. None of which were considered by officers to have a material impact on the assessment of the application and the content of the report provided to members. Nevertheless, members are advised there were 2 corrections, one of which was on page 169, just with regard to the number of bedrooms serving the property and the assessment within the amenity space calculation. And the other one was a misplaced reference to where the trees were being planted on page 171, where it references the western boundary, but in fact it was the eastern boundary. With regard to those received from the neighbour, this was relating to a document submitted or prepared by the applicant in terms of overshadowing, and the concerns related to overshadowing and the loss of light contained therein. They requested that a further overshadowing and light assessment be undertaken. In terms of the impact on the neighbouring properties, this is considered to be covered completely within the officer's report, specifically on pages 165 to 167, which consider the impacts on 34A Smithies Avenue. So I won't repeat everything that's said within there, but nevertheless, that's the content of the matters arising. Could I please have my slides now, please, Amy? Thanks, Amy's doing it. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so the application site is land within the curtilage of 34 Smithies Avenue, which is a detached dwelling. The site is located within the settlement boundary of Sully, within a predominantly residential area. The street scene is characterised by a mix of different house types, including some infill development. Members are advised that works associated with the proposals have already commenced, as evident at this morning's site visit, and the photograph on the following slide, which shows a recent site visit picture from the front of the site. Okay, so the next slide, please. So this is a full application which seeks to regularise the new dwelling which is under construction at the site. The proposal would introduce a predominantly 2-storey dwelling with a 3rd-storey element, which you can see here within this infill plot. The dwelling would be accessed directly from Smithies Avenue and would be served by 2 off-road parking spaces to the front, as well as private amenity space to the rear. The dwelling is contemporary in design with a flat roof and would be finished with render brick and metal cladding. So just quickly, I think it might be worth just giving a bit of context to the history of the site. So we can go on to the next slide, please. As detailed in the report, planning permission was first given for a new 2-storey dwelling on the site under application 2015/01055/FUL, as can be seen on the site plan before you. Just for members' information, the footprint and location of the dwelling is broadly commensurate with that now being considered under this application. For reference, this permission was a 2015 permission. The works were implemented through groundworks on the site. Next slide, please. And these are elevation details of the dwelling as originally approved under that 2015 consent. So members will note that it's a predominantly 2-storey dwelling with a small protrusion and area of kind of enclosure to the roof. So next slide, please. Next slide. I think we'll move on from this one, please. So a subsequent application was submitted in 2023 for a revised design to incorporate a 3rd storey to the dwelling, as shown on the slide before you. In the top corner there, you've got the, I think probably the most useful is the one next to the existing house on the top right, with the proposed dwelling there showing the 3rd storey proposed on the dwelling. Following officer concerns, the additional floor was set further back from the frontage and subsequently approved as shown. However, it came to light through an enforcement investigation that there were inconsistencies between the approved plans and in turn with the assessment within the officer's report, which was written in consideration of the application at the time. The principal issue was that not all plans had been updated to reflect the amended elevations in the 3rd storey of the building, inclusive of the enclosed roof terrace, which you can see to the left-hand side of the middle elevation on the right-hand side was set further back relative to number 34A Smithies Avenue, which resulted in a circa 3 metre projection beyond the principal rear elevation of that property, compared to a 1 metre, which was considered in the original assessment. Next slide, please. So this is, again, back to the current proposals. The current application has now been submitted seeking to regularise the development as shown again on this plan. It's important to note the current proposals are being considered on their individual planning merits and seek to regularise the new development as is currently under construction. I will seek to address some of the issues briefly below. Firstly, in terms of design, members are advised a broadly similar scheme was found to be acceptable under previous applications, including the addition of the third storey under 2023 application. Although some minor design alterations are proposed, inclusive of an amended front elevation and amended fenestration detail, which are largely circled in red on those in terms of window changes on that plan at the top. It's considered that in terms of its design, noting the variety of architectural styles and designs in the area, that the contemporary design approach being implemented is acceptable and would not have detrimental impact on the character of the street scene. It's acknowledged that perhaps the principal issue has arisen from the above discrepancies is the relationship of the development relative to neighbouring properties. These are kind of largely detailed within the officer report. As detailed within the report, it is found that noting the separation with properties to the rear on Oyster Bend and properties opposite, the proposal will not give rise to an unacceptable detriment to neighbouring amenity, whilst the level of projection is also found to be acceptable relative to 34 Smithies Avenue itself. Additional windows in the side elevations, as noted previously, are proposed to be obscure glazed and fixed shut up to 1.7 metres from finished floor level, and this is proposed to be controlled by way of condition attached to any consent granted, which is considered to mitigate related issues. Pardon, excuse me. Next slide, please. Okay, so the officer's assessment within the report for the 2023 application considered the level of projection beyond the rear of 34A Smithies Avenue to the southeast as circa 1 metre, albeit it appears that this was erroneous in part due to the discrepancies between the amended and original plans. As noted, the proposals before members have been considered in detail by officers, and the site plan shows the relationship with number 34A more accurately. This includes the projection of circa 3 metres to the rear of the principal dwelling of 34A, a 3-storey mass, inclusive of the roof terrace and the associated slatted terrace. Is there any way we could zoom in a little bit on that slide, Amy? Sorry, I know appreciate it's a little bit small. So yeah, basically the white at the area, so the neighbouring dwelling 34A is visible on the left. The white edged area shows the extent of the roof terrace and its projection beyond. The left-hand white element to the rear there shows where the slatted terrace would be, which in essence would appear as 3-storey mass when viewed from the neighbouring property. It's acknowledged that proposals are visible from the neighbouring property, including from a roof terrace, rear-facing openings and the yard area adjacent to the boundary. If we could show a photo on the next slide, please, Amy. First photo here is taken from the rear garden. The steel frame of the proposal is clearly visible beyond the scaffolding. It's red in colour. It's clearly differentiated from the scaffolding itself. So the first photo is taken from rear of application property to provide context of the relationship between the two. Next photo, please, Amy. And this photo is taken from the rear-facing openings within 34A towards development, which to demonstrate the relationship between the two. Given the set-off from the roof terrace, which is shown on the photo before you, and that the yard area adjacent to the boundary does not appear to form the most valued and used area of the amenity space, it's considered on balance that proposals would not unreasonably enclose the outlook of the neighbouring occupiers or have an overbearing impact. Furthermore, noting its relative aspect to the northwest of 34A, it's considered that it would also not result in an unacceptable loss of light. To this end, considering a current revised application on its individual planning merits, it's considered that the proposals would not give rise to an unacceptable impact on the amenity enjoyed by occupiers of number 34A or other occupiers as detailed in the report and briefly previously. It's noted that the reason given for calling of the application principally relate to concerns with regard to highways officers' comments. Initially, it's noted that comments were received indicating that free spaces should be provided within the site to comply with the adopted parking standards SVG. However, members are advised that the parking standards equate to maximum standards. Previous approvals had required 2 on-site spaces, and officers' observations suggest that on-street parking is available to serve the development. As such, officers sought clarification from the council's highways engineer, who subsequently provided amended comments indicating they had no objection to the proposals providing 2 spaces on the site, and obviously having any excess being accommodated in the road, as with previous proposals. So, noting all of the above and the considerations detailed within the officer report, it's recommended that the application is approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. As I indicated at the start, we do have a public speaker on this, and the local member wishes to speak as well. So, Mr. Aldridge, if and when you're ready, you can start. Your time will start as you start speaking. You have 3 minutes.
Dear committee, we strongly call upon you to reject this planning application. Why? The planning officer asked the applicant to move the front elevation back on the 3rd storey only, to be in line with the neighbouring properties. New drawings were submitted, and due to the moving of the front elevation only as requested, planning was granted. But unbeknown to the planning officer, the applicant had moved both the 2nd and 3rd storey of the development beyond the rear elevation boundary line in these new plans. 4 metres on the 3rd storey and 3 metres on the 2nd storey, all way beyond the rear boundary line. Planning was passed without knowledge of the drawings being altered to the rear elevation, as confirmed in the final report, which said the 2nd storey is 1 metre beyond rear elevation boundary line and the 3rd storey is flush to the rear boundary. My father realised the work being carried out was not as per the plans. The planning inspector needed 3 visits to stop the build. Now we have a retrospective planning request on a construction way beyond the rear elevation boundary line that's not been allowed in any neighbouring planning applications in the past. It is a 10-metre high construction and is 4 metres in depth beyond the rear elevation. On this planning application, the highways report says 3 cars are needed to be parked off-road to meet the policy. It said it needed to adjust the drawings and move the front wall back. 3 weeks later, the highways officer is asked to change the report. Contrary to the above policy, they now say 2 cars are okay on site and 1 on the road, but there is no room outside the property for a parked car. In regard to the MD policies, the siting, bulk and close proximity of the proposal represents an unneighbourly form of development, being an overbearing and dominant building to the rear of the existing dwellings, which will adversely affect the residential amenities of the adjoining properties, which include overshadowing and the rights to light issues. The outdoor space should be 80 square metres. The applicant says there is approximately 50 square metres and the planning officer says there's 215. Another inconsistency, which is the theme throughout these applications. This self-build has been ongoing for 23 years and has been rejected by the Welsh Assembly Planning Inspectorate twice for a smaller development not built beyond the rear elevation boundary, which has overshadowing issues. My father is the innocent party here, and he looks to you all to reject the planning application as it's been presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aldridge. Can I ask members of the committee whether they have any points of clarification they would like to ask of Mr. Aldridge? I see no indication. Thank you then, Mr. Aldridge. Next then is Councillor Marnie. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I would repeat the fact that I know both the applicant and the objector, as it were, on a casual basis, seen them every year, so having lived in the area. So I have no skin in the game on this. And I'm fairly neutral about the merits or otherwise of the actual proposals here. What I'm concerned about, I was contacted by Mr. Aldridge on behalf of his father with his concerns, made aware of this a couple of weeks ago, and facilitated a meeting with planning officers at his house to see if any of his answers could be answered by those planning officers in a hope that we could avoid even going to full planning. I must say I was absolutely astounded by the history of this, recent history of this development, in that as per usual, neighbours and near neighbours were given notice of the initial application and the details, of course, and documents applying to this. And yet, they certainly didn't oppose those in any way, so they can't be accused of NIMBYism. But what actually happened, as has just been described, is that Mr. Aldridge, the owner of the house, noticed the framework of the partially developed house being seemingly out of kilter with what he felt had been passed. This must have been backed up, obviously, by the Vale Planning Department, as they persuaded the developer to stop and then eventually apply for retrospective planning approval. During the course of this meeting, I have to say I was totally astounded at the history, and I have to be very critical of the Vale Planning Department on this, in that what appeared to be happening, and the best I could make out of it, was so convoluted that the plans had been passed and then apparently changed, or the builder or the developer was working to a different plans. And it's been admitted by the Vale in correspondence, including one that came in so late today, I haven't had time to print it off, although I did read it, is that the Vale have actually said that they're either plans submitted by mistake, or their planning officer had made a mistake who has now left and can't be questioned about this. So it's one total and utter mess, as has been described. Even on this latest retrospective planning application, the Highways Department have said there would be 3 cars needed and a turning circle, spaces for such. And then 2 days later, it was changed. And upon querying this, I was told that the Highways Department weren't using were using old standards. So actually saying, just to compound things, virtually accusing their colleagues of being incompetent, bearing in mind, of course, their colleagues in the highways are putting in objections or approvals for other developments. In fact, the highways officer actually mentioned in his initial report that he felt that the whole building plans may have to be changed. But anyway, my point for being here is that we requested that this be held over for a couple of weeks because Mr. Aldridge has submitted a Freedom of Information request to the Vale on the correspondence between the Planning Department and other issues, which he feels may help councillors determine the full facts of this complete net of shambles, I would say, to a much better degree. This has been turned down, but surely any fair-minded person, and it would be fair both for the applicant and Mr. Aldridge himself, to hear the full facts, that if Mr. Aldridge finds out that his freedom of information doesn't have any bearing on the case, well, then that's good for the applicant, but at least everybody knows everything that's going on. So surely the application is already in. It's under time scale already with the clock ticking down. Surely by deferring this just by even 4 to 5 weeks, everybody could be satisfied that everything has been unfairly, including the applicant, Mr. Aldridge. There will obviously be one disappointed party in this. So I would ask that this decision is deferred just for a few weeks for something that we've just heard has been going on for 23 years. So I make no comment on the merits of the building, but I just want fairness all round, both for the applicant and for the objector. And I would request that it is deferred, the actual decision, just for a few short weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marnie. Both speakers, both Mr. Roberts and Mr. Aldridge, sorry, and Councillor Marnie.
Hi, Chair. I'll respond on a few points Councillor Marnie's raised because I was the one who sent an email earlier today. Obviously, there's a lot of history in terms of this site. I mean, the focus for members needs to be the application before them. In terms of the history, Rob has outlined that quite well in terms of there was a previous application. The application that was approved in terms of the elevation treatment is primarily the same application that you have before you today. The difference is that the floor plans on the former application did not marry up with the elevation drawings. So there was an issue there that wasn't picked up by officers. It was an error. That's been accepted. But the application before you today is to regularize development in terms of the floor plans and the elevations. So we have to consider it on its own merits. So the issues raised in terms of amenity have been covered in the report. Rob has also covered them, and I understand that members have been to the site today. So whilst noting Councillor Marnie's concerns about the background to this, we have to focus on this one application before us, not the former application. And the matter relating to a freedom of information request, again, that relates to a former application, has no bearing on this application. So members must be clear that we need to focus on the elevations and floor plans presented in this application and not cloud it with the application from 2013-14 and later on the 2015 application as well. In terms of obviously, the report discusses there are dwellings approved on this site previously, as I mentioned just then. But yeah, the other issue as well around highway issue that Councillor Marnie raised, obviously during the application, the Highway Authority responded and mentioned the potential for 3 parking spaces. However, officers are of the view that the SPG, it refers to maximum parking spaces, so we should be providing less parking spaces on new developments in a general sense to promote sustainable travel. So we had regard to that. We went back, we queried that with the highway officer, and then they provided their new response. So so those are the issues, but members just need to focus on this application. I don't think deferring it is appropriate in this sense. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Liam. In that case, we come to the point where we can throw it open to the members of the committee if they wish to comment. Councillor Cowp, you've come on the screen.
Yes, thank you. I was just a bit concerned about the garden area, because we seem to have been given 3 different figures. What is the actual figure for the garden space or the surrounding space of the house?
Thank you, Councillor Cowp. Any other members of the committee want to comment at this point? In that case, either Rob or Liam, probably Rob. Would you like to respond to Councillor Cowp, please? We can't hear you, Rob, for some reason.
He needs to move his mic down.
Your mic is sticking up.
Sorry, excuse me. Sorry about that. Right, so yeah, the correct figure for the amenity space is that quoted in the current officer report, which I believe offhand, I'm not sure I've got the report open, was it 220 square meters? So that was right. Again, that was obviously a scaling error on the 2023 application, because I don't believe that was ever the case again on the 2015 application. So just let me find it to confirm. Yes, so I've just measured the plans. It's 215 square meters is quoted in the officer report, and that's what I've just scaled on the plans before me now. So that's the correct measurement, 215 square meters.
Thank you very much.
Like to move officer's recommendation.
Do we have a second? I see no second. In that case, Councillor Payne, I assume that's the second. Thank you very much. And Councillor Williams. In that case,
I'll ask a question.
I think the crux of the matter here is not the car parking spaces, or perhaps even the amount of garden amenity space. It's to me, it's has this been built to plan, and is this overlooking? And if it is it significant enough to be an issue? The officers obviously telling me in the report that because they're saying their recommendation is this should be allowed, that's not an issue or enough of an issue. Now, I'm not sure, which is why I'm not sure. So I don't know. I don't know if there needs to be more of a debate, and if there can be a debate on it, or how it's going to be explained enough to make me satisfied. I don't know. The picture with the view over to the sea, with the red girdering coming up, was a bit surprising, shall I say. The scaffolding, I could see that, and obviously that wouldn't be there, but there would be still stuff around the girdering to make it a building. But I don't know. I'm unsure, Chairman.
Councillor Ernest, you were on the site visit this morning. You have your hand up. I presume it's
Yes, Chairman, I did. And it was very interesting to go to both locations, to go up to the existing site and see a tape measure laid out between two, I'll call them RSJs, two seals anyway, which showed a difference of round about 9 feet, approaching something I think about 2.8 metres, but I'll call that 9 feet in old money. What I was concerned about was the overall bulk of the new development. If you looked at the adjoining property, which I believe is where at least one of the objectors lives, it's of a modest building with relatively small rooms from what I could see. We had the pleasure of going through that property immediately following our visit to the application site, which is huge in comparison. Obviously, those members who were not present have only got photographs to go on. But also, Chairman, there's another property to the west of the application site as well. And whilst that is a reasonably large development, in my view, it was nowhere near the bulk of the site we're looking at today. And when you see the red steels, and you can see them in the photographs, how high those red steels are, bearing in mind that there has to be a roof on top of that as well, I think that the observations that have been made by neighbours about, and I'm paraphrasing now, but basically the overall site and bulk of the development are very valid. And on those grounds, Chairman, I'm afraid I have to vote against the application, despite the explanations given to us tonight. There has been an error made by the planning department. That's accepted. The officer, we're told, is no longer with us, but even if they were with us, the error has still been made, and that's historical. So, Chairman, this is a free vote in this committee, and I'm afraid that I am voting against the application. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ernest. Councillor Payne, you have your hand up.
I do. Thank you, Chair. As somebody who wasn't present this morning, but who regularly walk my dog there, I've watched this build all the way along from its inception. And I think it's quite nice. I don't have a problem with it. The front is the sea. So the only path in the front is the grass path in the front. I don't have a problem with it. I kind of quite like it. So I'm going to be voting for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Any other members of the committee want to contribute?
Ian wants to come in, does he?
You want to speak? Yeah. Ian Robinson, want to make a contribution?
Thanks, Chair. I haven't been to the site, so I'm not passing comment on the specifics of this scheme. It was just really coming back to something Councillor Hodges said, and I just want to give a bit of context to, I think, just how we assess these kinds of things. Can I just share the screen again, Amy? it was, as I say, and I emphasise that I've not been to the site, so I'm not passing comment on the merits. But the way we will typically look at these things is we look at the relationship with a development to a neighbouring garden, and that's why every scheme is treated on its merits, because the relationship to a site and the kind of the extent and the size and the orientation of a neighbour's garden has bearing on that. So, in terms of specifics, what I mean is, when you look at the neighbour's garden here, there's an element of garden between the neighbour's rear projection and the development, which is probably more acutely affected by the development. There is then a relatively large remainder of garden which has a more open outlook and is less affected. So I just wanted to give the context of, when we look at the impact of a development, we will take into account the size of a neighbour's garden, how much of it is affected by a development, what the kind of remaining unaffected outlook would be, and kind of weigh that up. If a neighbour had a much smaller garden and the entirety of it was in close proximity to a development, we might look at it slightly differently. So I just wanted to kind of give that context to how we would kind of treat each one on its merits and look at the entirety of kind of how a neighbour's affected, not just maybe the one kind of part of the garden.
Thank you, Ian. Rob, do you want to sum up what's been said by the various members, and then there is obviously dissent, so we'll have to go to a vote on this. But Rob, if you'd like to sum up.
Yeah, I can do. I mean, I think I acknowledge the points raised, and these matters are subjective in terms of, design and what have you. I mean, what I would say is the third story element is set significantly back, just in terms of what Councillor Ennis was mentioning in terms of the design, and, it is set back significantly from a front, the kind of principal frontage of the dwelling. I believe it's 9 metres offhand. And again, in terms of the neighbouring impacts, we have kind of considered those extensively as detailed within the officer report. And again, it's a subjective judgment on the current application on its individual merits, appreciating obviously what's gone before. So really, it's just that, we have considered the impacts and really do acknowledge that the property is visible from the neighbouring property. It's just because something's visible doesn't mean it's overbearing or is unacceptably oppressive. So it's just noting that point. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Rob. In that case, I think you can now move straight to the vote, as I see no other hands up from members of the committee. So you're either voting for or against officers' recommendations. Still waiting for one more to vote, I think. That's it. We now have the full complement of people eligible to vote. Remembering Councillor Buckley is not part of this. So we have 9 votes in favour of officers' recommendations and 4 opposed. So that officers' recommendations are carried. Thank you. Right, that is the end of the agenda as I have it. I have no items which are urgent and nothing on part 2. So thank you all for your attendance. Thank you for a largely successful debate, and have a good evening.